Welcome to What Brought You Here Today, an interview-style mental health podcast that focuses on real experiences and how we navigate and move through them. The guests on this show provide personal and professional insight at times and come from all walks of life. Not all of the guests work in the mental health field, and they've all chosen to be brave and vulnerable while sharing parts of their story with you. Please keep your own mental health and well-being in mind while listening. You here today. I am Ryan, your host, and today I am joined by Jenna. Jenna, we are going to talk about coping with homophobia and transphobia from family members and kind of what that looks like. But why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? Do a quick intro before we jump in.
Yeah, I'd love to. Hi, I'm Dr. Jenna Brownfield. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a licensed psychologist here in Minnesota, also a PsyPAC provider, so that grants me permission to provide online therapy to folks across the U.S. and 43 different states. And I specialize in supporting LGBTQ folks through therapy.
This is a good conversation for us to be having right now.
Yeah.
Maybe a conversation that's been ongoing, right? It's kind of a sensitive topic for quite some time now. But what got you kind of interested in this work first?
Yeah, so in general, I have become interested in specifically supporting LGBTQ folks, a combination professionally and personally. First, I'm a queer woman, I'm bi, and so I have, my own journey and lived experience walking through a lot of the things that come up for LGBTQ folks when they're seeking therapy support. And professionally, from that side, my very first experience learning how to be a therapist, just trained to be a therapist, was at a local community center that was specifically for trans folks in Colorado. And so, from the very beginning, learning how to do therapy, I was learning how to do that in support of trans folks. And so that's just been present from the beginning of my professional journey.
I think conversations about LGBTQ plus people and homophobic, transphobic people are happening more now. I guess particularly in the family relationships and maybe just as a whole.
Yeah, I'm definitely noticing it in the family relationships, just becoming more and more common, especially after the recent election last fall in 2025. That while a lot of LGBTQ folks have been aware, maybe my parents aren't, the greatest advocate or the best support, or they don't explicitly support me, but we have a good relationship. Then following the election and our current social political climate, especially all the anti-trans rhetoric escalating, questions about LGBTQ rights being secure or in danger, that now is just less avoidable in family conversations or spending time with family, because it seems like, every week there's a new discussion happening nationally or locally. So it just becomes harder to avoid the topic, or even with avoidance, that silence about it from family stands out a lot more to LGBTQ folks than it did before.
Sure.
Because there's so much happening. Yeah, that it's like if a family member isn't bringing it up, that just is so much more noticeable, that because we know they're aware, like it's unavoidable in the news. So you're aware this is happening and that it impacts me, but we're choosing as a family to not bring it up, or that you have decided to not ask me how I'm doing in response to that.
Are you noticing with clients, and maybe in personally or professionally, are more people taking a step back from these conversations than previously because of the political climate and like the socio-political climate that we're in?
Like more people deciding I'm not going to go there with family?
Yeah. Like, I don't even know, like, maybe how to really word this, or like, I guess like what's worth the conversation right now?
Yeah, there's a lot more kind of internal calculus of,
Yeah.
do I have the like emotional bandwidth to go into this with my family, or am I deciding that just needs to wait? It's tricky, and each person, is making a different decision with that. I have definitely seen some clients step further into that of, in order to save my relationship with my parents, I have to say something. I have to try to help us change our relationship, or else, like, I don't know. I'm afraid I'm going to move to estrangement, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Which
so,
kind of go ahead.
yeah. And so they feel like their option to save the relationship is starting to talk about it more. Other folks who are deciding and realizing, I'm not quite there yet, that it's not worth, kind of the emotional risk of getting into that with my family. And I'm going to try to continue riding through it and leaning on other support in the meantime. And some folks, deciding it is time for estrangement. Like, it's not, the effort's not there to try to save the relationship, that it's time to call it.
I think that kind of just moved us into the second question about like what is like the emotional toll that pretending everything is fine
Mhm.
on someone who is going to pretend everything's fine when knowing that it's really not. And what impact is that having?
Yeah. So I just hear a lot more folks talking about how being in kind of that messy middle sometimes brings up these really
Sure.
confusing thoughts of, oh, I just wish they were even more blatantly homophobic or transphobic. So I would know, right? I would know that, like, the relationship's done and it can't be saved. So that can be really confusing to wrestle with, of like, is what they said homophobic enough for me to address it or for me to change the relationship? And then it can also create this experience of, when you hear something homophobic or transphobic from your family, while still seeing them be loving towards you or good to you, it kind of puts you in a position of feeling like, well, I'm being viewed as, a good gay. I'm not like the other gays who are demanding too much, or, right, like, too flamboyant or too butch, that my family views me as a good gay, and therefore, like, I'm okay in their eyes. And that doesn't really feel good on the heart either, because it feels very conditional, right? Of like, as long as I stay within those boundaries, I'm okay to my family.
Yeah. How are you helping individuals kind of like navigate that or like where everyone has their own like limit and line, right? So how do you
Mhm.
kind of help them internally and how we do it in therapy too, but just like
Mhm.
where's your own limit?
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to, at least through individual therapy, right? Like, I don't have the opportunity, since I'm not a family therapist, to work with the family as a system together. I'm working individually with someone who's in the midst of that dynamic. And so, individually, the things that tend to be helpful are being able to become more and more aware of what's happening for you in these moments. When this plays out in the family, what need you know, that injures. So I tend to be more of an attachment-based therapist. So a lot of times those homophobic and transphobic moments are pulling on, these attachment injuries of wanting to be understood, wanting to be loved, wanting to not feel alone, and especially wanting that from your parents, right? A lot of us need and crave that from our parents, even when we're adults. And so, yeah, individually being able to notice it, kind of what's happening on the deeper level, and then how can I still have that need met even if my parents never get there for me, right? Like, how do I feel understood, loved, less alone if my parents can never get there?
Helping them also like formulate these conversations. Like I know for me I
Mhm.
do a lot of work with like daughters particularly and like establishing boundaries because I
Yeah.
work primarily with women, but like role playing these conversations of like pretend I'm your mom and like let's walk this
Yes.
back a bit.
Yes.
As like
Yes.
awkward as it
Right.
is, but you have to be able
Mhm.
to I think you everyone has to be able to figure out like okay, this like that felt okay for me to say, but this doesn't feel okay for me to say.
Yeah, especially right when we're talking about conversations that are, like, emotionally risky to do. It's
Right?
like, yeah, we need to be able to practice. I don't want you to just go in cold to that when, like, your heart's probably gonna be racing, right? Your mind's gonna be racing. Maybe you'll be tearful. Like, that's probably what your body's response is gonna be when you go into this conversation. So, yeah, practicing is really, really helpful to that. And what I tend to hear my clients say is more successful, and I try to guide them through, is when you go into that conversation with your parents, I know the instinct might be to be the educator, be the advocate, but what's going to be more if there's a chance for them to be moved by this, what's going to be more moving is for you to show up as their daughter, as their kid, saying, I need you, right? I am your kid and I need you, right? That's why I'm asking for these changes. Not because it's like the right thing to do socially, right? Which is all true, but odds are a lot of the clients I talk to, like they've tried that route multiple times with their parents already, and everyone just ends up frustrated and nothing changes. So it's like, we got to go in from the relationship avenue, and you got to let down that kind of like educator advocate role and show up as their kid, you know, telling them
Yeah.
what you need.
Yeah. Which is probably going to be more like genuine and impactful, like you're saying, than trying
Mhm.
to educate parents who maybe like you don't even want to learn.
Yeah. I mean, how do any of us feel when someone's, unless we're specifically seeking out like an educational moment,
Yeah.
that when that just comes up unexpectedly, especially something where we're like really at the beginning stages of our own growth in, it can it triggers a lot of shame and then we just freeze. And so, yeah, it doesn't create a lot of movement, unfortunately.
How do you see some of this, I guess, like middle ground right now? We'll get more towards the like
Mhm.
shift towards estrangement in a minute, but being in kind of this limbo, how is this showing up with like life's like big life events, milestones, the holidays just passed. We're, a little past recording for that. But even then, like the holidays are going to come back around.
Yeah, yeah, right. It's cyclical.
It's going to come.
Yeah, I mean, like these conversations tend to be on our minds a lot more with any kind of big family gathering. So, yeah, holiday times. If you have a big life event coming up, like a wedding where families gathering, or like a family reunion, or right, like welcoming a new baby into the family, that's when these dynamics just come to head more, or you're in the middle of them a lot more. And that big family events, especially like a wedding or like welcoming a baby, kind of, uh, I think for a lot of folks creates more urgency of like, oh yeah, I do. Like, I need my parents to get on board and I need it now. Like, I need it before this baby joins the family. I need it before we're all together at a wedding and their homophobia or transphobia is like ruining our wedding day. And so it just makes it more and more present in those moments. I think, especially for queer folks in early parenthood or in the process of becoming parents, there can be something that comes up of, well, I've accepted certain homophobia or transphobia from my family, because that's what I've decided is okay for me at this time. But now to think about my child being subjected to those comments, like there's almost a different feeling of like needing to protect your kid from that more than you would protect yourself, right? Like, but I gotta get my parents to change before my kid gets exposed to that.
Yeah. How do you navigate that piece of like, I need my parents to change?
Yeah. I mean,
That's a big ask.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to, like we mentioned a few minutes ago, figuring out instead of us repeating, the dynamic I've already been in when I've asked for changes, whether that's, I've just pretended everything is fine. So how are they to know I was even upset? Or, I've responded, but it's always gotten tense or blown up or derailed. Of just how do I start to do that differently in hopes that that will bring them to show up differently, right? So how do I show up, like we said, more with that? I'm asking for this because I love you. I don't want to lose you, right? I want you to be in my life. I want you to be, if you're a parent or becoming a parent, I want you to be in my kid's life. And when these things happen, it makes me scared that like I won't be able to have you around without it hurting. And it also becomes part of letting go of you oftentimes being in the role of, well, you've been the easy kid, right? We didn't have to worry about you. You've been the easy kid. It's like, now I got to let go and accept that I'm like, kind of a problem child in the family.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Because,
no longer have that title, right? It changes.
yeah, so some kind of loss of identity with that and discomfort with that transition of no longer being like the favorite or the golden child or the easy kid, of changing your family role.
What do adult LGBTQ plus children typically want in their family relationships? And I know we have a
Yeah.
second part of that. The second part of that is like, what are some common misconceptions that parents have about what the children are asking for?
Yeah. So a lot of times, what I hear my clients saying is they don't need their parent to be perfect or, that they don't even necessarily need their parent to take this like giant formal leap of, I joined PFLAG and I,
Sure.
did all these like very structured, organized, or I read 5 books about this. I mean, all those are welcome steps, but that oftentimes, you know, the LGBTQ adults in these situations aren't even making requests that are that large. A lot of times the request is just, I want to see that there's effort. I want to see you try, right? I want to see you acknowledging the fact that I am queer or trans and asking me about my life, right? Asking me about my life, asking me how I'm doing in regards to being LGBT right now. And so, yeah, there isn't this need for perfection. And especially from an attachment lens, we know, right? It's not about being perfect in a relationship. That's not what fuels secure attachment or healthy attachment. It's about the fact that there will be ruptures, right? There will be injuries in the relationship. But what creates a healthy relationship, a secure relationship, is repair, right? That there is a circling back to reconnect. And so that's often what's needed of like, you don't need to be perfect as my parent, but when something is hard between us, or if I tell you like this is hard between us, what I need from you is that attempted repair. Like for you to remind me you do love me, you do want to be there for me, and needing that reconnection.
Is there still middle ground if someone's not doing the repair? Like, is the adult child still trying?
Yeah, I do see that. I mean, that can be a long kind of season in the relationship.
Yeah.
That it's not like, oh, I'm going to try this for 3 months, and if they don't change, then I'm moving to estrangement. That making that call to move to estrangement is often a very lengthy process for folks. And so, yeah, it can be a very long time period kind of in that in between of trying to make change or reconciling the fact of they are changing, but it still isn't enough for what I need.
Are you seeing some of the misconceptions be that like parents are interpreting or assuming that the child wants them to be perfect or like 100% on board or joining
Yeah.
PFLAG, doing these big
Yeah,
grand
I
gestures?
think I think there is pressure or this idea of like perfectionism getting in the way. I mean, from both
Sure.
ends of this dynamic of
Yeah.
like, if I can't do it perfect, it's not good enough,
Sure.
or it's never going to be good enough for you. That it brings up that insecurity, and that imperfection. I think what also gets in the way is, I have young kids myself, and it's so common to for all of us to kind of project onto our child. So, right, like, oh, they look like me, or they
Sure.
get that from me,
Yeah.
or even, right, like to project certain aspirations you have from them, a certain future you have pictured for them. And all that is, right, like normal. So many of us do that. And of course, you want to have dreams for your child, of course. But you also have to allow yourself to fully see your child for who they are and the fact that they are not you, and they may not want the same things for their life that you want for them.
Is that book Raise the Child You Have, Not the Child You Want?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, right, your child might be queer or trans, and are you able to be there for them through that when it's an experience that if you're straight, you may not know firsthand what that's like. And that can feel scary too, right? Like I'm trying to walk my child through an experience I don't know or understand. And so it can bring up that perfectionism, that sense of not being a good enough parent and all those insecurities.
It's making me think a lot about,
Mhm.
I think like maybe the last couple of years, particularly like adult children of emotionally immature parents has had like
Mm.
a big
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And like
Yes. Uh-huh.
it
Yeah,
has
a lot
been
of people
all
are
over.
reflecting on their
Yeah,
parent
right.
relationships. Yeah.
It has been all over social media. It has been a trending
Mhm.
topic. I mean, I have the book on my bookshelf. All of my
Mhm.
clients have like read it and we've had these conversations. I think it's really hard too for like us in this kind of like millennial sandwich generation who are doing a lot of this work actively to be more emotionally mature. And when you're trying to
Mhm.
create or navigate family dynamics, like also having to remind yourself that in my experience, it's more often than not that like our parents did not get that same emotional attunement and like training, right? Quotes like
Mhm.
nobody taught them how to be emotionally mature or like emotionally intelligent. So having these like scary big conversations too also there's that added layer.
Yeah, right, of their context.
Yeah.
And right, like what's their starting point versus where I need them to be as
Right.
their queer
Right.
child. And like or like sometimes I've asked clients, like we have gotten clear on what you need from your parents. But when we pause right now and think about what realistically do you think is the best case scenario? Is the most you can get from them? And when we realize like that is a very different answer than what I need, like, okay, so what do we do with that divide? Do you think you'll be okay with that? Do you want to give it more time to see if you're okay with that? But yeah, to realize when I think about who they actually are as a person,
Yeah.
what do I think they're capable of in terms of growth?
Yeah. And in terms of like, they're not going to be able to just learn all of these skills and become emotionally mature and aware overnight, or
Mhm.
maybe in a year.
Yes.
For some people, it's not even really available to them
Hmm.
for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with, this is making me think of kind of, right, like generational shifts in your family. As you mentioned, think about the context of your parents versus the context you grew up in. And like realizing your parents maybe are more accepting than their parents were, right? That's true. And it's also true that like they're still not as far as you need them to be. That like progress can happen across generations, but oftentimes it's like much smaller than like what we need or what we hope for, but it doesn't mean it's not progress.
Okay, let's kind of shift into estrangement. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people understand what estrangement is. I think it's taken on the weird kind of trending name of no contact.
Yeah.
Right. And immediate, like when I was like logging on for this, I was like, oh my gosh, all I can think about is that dumb Mel Robbins article that was in the New York Times a couple months ago.
Yes. Yes. It did get a
Like,
lot of attention. Huh?
it did. And I think people really assume that like no contact is forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that like in order to be no contact, there has to be like like I guess maybe not even now, like bad, like most of the time people are just kind of going no contact to go no contact. But when we think about that in maybe this context for homophobic and transphobic people and family members, what is that looking like in terms of considering estrangement? How do you kind of discern when to like move towards that?
Yeah. When it comes to discerning, like, is it time to move towards that? It really comes down to if you make the decision to go no contact or pursue estrangement, can you be like, do you feel at peace with yourself around that decision? And I don't think that's necessarily going to be like, I'm 100% at peace and I never have doubt about that. Some people do have that clarity of like, yeah, it was very clear that's the decision I need to make. But, kind of, do you think you could be clear enough to trust that decision? Because when you make that decision, you're still going to have a lot of feelings about it, in terms of you might still have moments of self-doubt, like, oh, maybe I was just exaggerating how bad it was, that a lot of that kind of almost like internal gaslighting or self-doubt is going to happen. Maybe you'll have some feelings of relief, right? That's totally possible too. And then there also can be like feelings of grieving, right? Like I'm grieving the possibility that we could have had a better relationship because like in a way I've surrendered that possibility, or at least surrendered it for now, as you said, Ryan, like the reality that a no contact or estrangement decision isn't necessarily a permanent decision if both folks are willing to come back, and try again in the future. And that sometimes there can be value in waiting and saying like, it's just not time for this. Right.
How do you
That,
help them with like the anticipatory grief of this process?
mhm.
Which is like huge. I work a lot with women who are in the process of separating or divorce, and like
Mm,
this level of anticipatory grief coupled with like when they get to kind of like that final end point, whether it's like the
yeah.
separation or the divorce, of like almost feeling bad that they don't feel bad anymore. Like, and I'm
Yes.
always
Yeah,
right.
that
And
does come up.
I'm always like, you've had a year or however long, like you've been processing this and grieving this
Yeah.
for longer. And like your partner just found out like 3 months ago. So, like,
Yes. Yes. A
so
very
the playing
similar
field isn't
dynamic
equal.
happens
Yeah.
here. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Of like, is it wrong that I'm not, is it wrong that I'm not feeling, you know, that I'm not crying about it every day?
Right. Like I'm not
Um,
sad. I don't feel guilty, or like,
yeah.
or less than I did at the beginning. Right.
Yeah. Because the reality is like, well, you've been aware for a long time, a lot of times like years that your parents haven't been supportive. Or like sometimes clients will say, well, I just don't know how my parents will react, right? Like if I bring this up in terms of like their homophobia, or if I, you know, start to go into contact. And a lot of times I tell them kind of jokingly, like, I think you do know. Like, I think if we pause, you
Right, yeah.
probably can anticipate. Like,
Yep.
you have enough,
Like, you know your
years with
parents.
them. Yeah, maybe not with like extreme, like they'll exactly say this or do this, but the broad strokes of what's going to happen there. And so exactly, because there's already been all this anticipation and understanding of what's happening in the relationship and like the possibility of the relationship ending, that then when that decision's made, there's already been a lot of that emotional grieving taking place.
In terms of moving towards estrangement, are you helping people, I guess, like, and maybe this goes back to the earlier topic of it being like really personalized, but like helping someone determine like what your parents are maybe doing is actually harmful to you, and you need to stop internally gaslighting yourself that it's not. Like a parent who's like, leans one way very strongly, only watches these kind of news, like is taking in all this information that most of us,
Mhm.
some of us know to not be correct. Like for your role as a therapist, are you ever like, that is actually harmful to you?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm a person. I'm a fellow queer
Yeah,
person. So
right?
yeah, sometimes I hear things and I'm like, let's get away from this
Yeah.
family
Okay.
member immediately.
Sure.
Like I personally have that response of like, I wish you would just
Yeah.
block them right now as we're sitting here, or like that I could go yell at them for you.
Yeah.
I definitely have that response. But, from a trauma informed lens, it's like, we know time and time again, right? Like, and these are adults.
Yes.
That's the caveat here.
Yes.
Like I'm working with adults. It's much more meaningful for you to be the one to decide, is this right? Is this abusive? Is this trauma? Than for someone to sit there and be like, you're being abused, right? And let me be your savior, take you out of that situation. And so I see my role as more helping them assess, like, where's the line for them. But I'm not going to be neutral and showing, kind of like my emotional response to that. Like, if what they're describing to me is, right, making me angry or like breaking my heart, making me cry, like, I show that to them or I tell them that's the effect it has on me when I hear that, right?
I
Like,
think it's
wow,
hard.
that infuriates me, right? Or like that makes me want to just pause and cry thinking about you hearing that from your parents.
I think it's really hard to be to be in the therapist chair and like recognize that for many people this is their normal,
Yeah.
and helping them navigate that like normal doesn't mean it's okay.
Yes. Yeah. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What are some common critiques about estrangement?
Yeah.
What are some things that are wrong about it?
Yeah.
That
I mean, I
maybe
think things that people get wrong, like you mentioned that article
Mel
recently
Robbins,
where it's kind of viewed as like a
her
trendy
in
thing
general.
that, yeah, that like young people are just like, well, I'll do this to be trendy.
Yeah.
Or I'll have like, I'm doing this because I'm fragile and have no tolerance for my parents' imperfections. But I think that's just like a really shallow understanding of what actually happens when someone is facing that decision of estrangement. And from like a queer perspective, I become very enraged with that critique of why is it that we critique and kind of critique adult children choosing no contact or estrangement from their parent, especially like a queer adult child. But we know the statistics are so high of parents rejecting queer youth. And so why is that not critiqued? Why is that not viewed as abandonment and estrangement? So that's what really enrages me. Is just such a double standard that really centers like the parents' experience and the parents' like right to have a relationship with their child, even in adulthood. Um, yeah, when it's like, where is the outrage about how much LGBTQ youth are disowned from their family? Like poetry is really a source of like meaning and hope for me. Like a lot of times I think about the poet Andrea Gibson, who is a queer poet. One of their poems, I think, really highlights emotionally what that is like. So their poem called Queer Youth Are 5 Times More Likely to Die by Suicide, one of the stanzas in there says, queer youth are 5 times more likely to adore the last man who walked on the moon just because he wrote his daughter's initials there, to know that there is no universe in which they would not be proud of their own children. So just emotionally to understand, like, your obligation as a parent to love your children unconditionally. Yeah. Andrea's an amazing poet. Yeah, and again, from an attachment perspective, I see it as like it is a parent's obligation to be a secure attachment figure, to be a secure caregiver for your child, and your child, even adulthood, is like the care receiver in that relationship.
Are there any other ways that estrangement gets misconstrued? Do you think
Mm-hmm.
is estrangement both ways, or is it one way communicating? Maybe the adult child in this conversation communicating, I am not in a place right now where we can have a relationship. And does it need to clearly be stated for the adult parent, I need you to also not contact me?
Sometimes, yeah, because like what often plays out is when the estrangement decision's been made or the no contact decision's been made, when you ask the adult child, how did that decision get reached? They will often say, I told them multiple times what I need to change, right? I tried multiple times to save our relationship. And oftentimes what the parent will say is, I had no idea, right? I'm totally blindsided by this. And I don't think anyone's lying in that sense. Like no one's lying. Like they genuinely do feel blindsided by it. But also, yeah, like the adult child was trying to test out, can this change before I decide no contact? And so, yeah, I can empathize with why it feels so extreme to a parent. But that doesn't mean your child went into the decision lightly.
How do you help someone decide when it's time to open the door back up? Even just to crack it open.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is about emphasizing to them that no decision is permanent. So yeah, if you want to test out again, you can, and then you can continue to keep going with that, or you can decide to step away again. As long as the other party's willing. They're a free person too, and they may say, right, like, I don't want to try again, but that you need to be emotionally ready for potentially being let down again. Like, do you think you're ready for that? But also, it's kind of like almost like fear of success too. Like, are you emotionally ready for the fact that like it may be better?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Like, what are you going to do if it's better?
Yeah. And like, how is that going to hit you?
Yes.
Because there can be grief with that of like, well, why couldn't they have done it sooner?
For sure.
Like, oh, so they were capable. They just chose not to do it until I took time away and like put us through this time of like lost time together. And there can be heartbreak with that.
I feel like sometimes it feels like there's no win. Like,
yeah. I mean, all of it's
can
hard.
Be for like a long time.
Yeah, all of it's like, hard.
It might not feel good for a long time.
Yeah. And I think, it's like in my heart, I want to promise people like, if you attempt to save the relationship, right, like it's going to end up being this like dreamy relationship with your parents, like your number one advocate. And not that that doesn't happen, right? Like I know like Fortune Feimster, who's like, a famous queer comedian, talks about how her relationship with her mom has evolved over time, right? Like there can be really amazing change that happens. And that's why like a lot of people decide it's worthwhile to try changing the relationship. So I don't want to say that's like totally unrealistic, but at the same time, it's like having to be okay with the fact that it might not change to the degree you're hoping, or may not change at all. And just, like how do we be realistic in this, even though it's, just kind of shitty to be realistic about it.
What advice would you give parents?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who are kind of like in the throes of this with their kids or their adult kids.
And parents, particularly like parents who want to maintain and have a relationship with their adult child.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does come down to trying to figure out how to be accepting of yourself and the fact that like you're not going to be perfect as a parent or a queer or trans ally. Easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
But like that is emotional like, work for you.
Right? Like brings up all the feelings within them of like, I'm not a perfect parent. And and that's okay because nobody is. It's impossible to be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. And like your kid doesn't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be there. They need you to be there for them. And yeah, so being okay with the fact that like you're going to get it wrong sometimes. And Yeah. And then I'd say my other advice for parents is I forgot, but if it comes back, Ryan, I'll add it
Yeah.
in.
For parents particularly, how can they educate themselves in a way that doesn't involve their child? Like, it should not be the adult child's
Hmm.
responsibility to educate them and inform them. So how does a parent
Yeah,
go about that?
yeah, I think really accessible ways for parents to do that is, I mean, in terms of just education and building understanding is like, so whether that's like reading news articles from queer media, so from queer news sources, or right, like watching queer media, um, like uh right now, right, and not that queer media is always like a perfect representation, but right, the fact of like, oh, if you want to watch, so right now in January, when we're recording this, heated rivalry is like all
Oh my
the
gosh.
discussion right now in queer media, right, like even just if,
Yes.
right, kind of like romance shows or something you love, right? Like if you're like a mom who's like, I love Hallmark romance, try to venture over and just watch
Yeah.
like Heated Rivalry and see if you get into some romance and just like comfort and understanding, or right, like queer romance novels if you're into
Yeah.
romance. Just trying to find
Heated
like,
rivalry might be a big jump.
yeah, might be further. Okay, maybe like Heartstoppers. Okay,
My girlfriend binged it in
yeah,
like 2 days, and she was like, I finished and I feel so empty inside. And I was like, I'm sure you and a lot of
yeah,
other people feel that way right now.
yeah. I know it's really got a chokehold on us.
Might be like a 0 to 100 for a parent.
Yeah, if you're like deep diving in, but right, even like
That's where to
softer
go.
things like Heartstoppers, yeah, or like the HBO show We're Here,
Oh, sure.
which is drag queens like touring around the U.S. To small towns,
Yeah.
or right,
I
like
think even watching
Queer Eye,
like Queer Eye.
like
Right.
yeah, we all have our critiques on
Yeah.
Queer Eye, but it's like very accessible to like straight people for
Yes.
whatever reason. Like
Yeah.
yeah. So even things like that of like, is it the perfect representation or, it's not flawless, but it isn't a way to start to build understanding that, yeah, isn't putting it on your kid to educate you about everything. Or, yeah, I mean, locally, like I said earlier, if you want to join PFLAG, by all means, or even just like an email list for
Yeah.
PFLAG.
Just get some
Or
kind of information.
like here in Minnesota, like Gender Justice, you could even join like Gender Justice's email list just to know like what's going on locally in terms of some LGBTQ rights or trans rights, or yeah, like any local org's email list is just, kind of like a passive way for you to be learning.
What about listeners who might be struggling
Hmm.
with their family relationships right now? What would
Hmm.
you want them to know?
Yeah, I hope they know that wherever they are in that process is okay. And it's totally understandable if it doesn't feel straightforward to you of like, should I stay or should I go in this relationship? Like, it's okay to be in that messy in between space. And it's okay to decide you want to keep trying, even when it's hard for others to maybe understand why you feel that way. And it's okay if you feel kind of like this protective nature to pretend your parents aren't homophobic or transphobic, like
Yeah. Which I
that
imagine
that
is
can come up too,
hard.
and that's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any final thoughts for anyone listening?
Yeah. No, I just hope, folks are hanging in there how they can, especially, like I said, in family relationships right now where there's homophobia or transphobia happening. I have a resource I developed, which Ryan, maybe you can link in the show notes for folks. That's just a brief guide to help you kind of process through homophobic or transphobic moments with family. So whether it's, you have a specific experience that just kind of sent you on a roller coaster recently and you're like, I need to pause and kind of gather what the heck was that? Or if, yeah, you're kind of anticipating a family gathering and feeling really on edge about it and just want to be able to prepare yourself for that this guide just takes, maybe 15 or 20 minutes just to reflect and help you get ready for that.
Definitely link
Hmm.
that and your website. I know it's on your website, but I'll link both.
Thank you.
And you're local in Minnesota, but licensed with
Correct.
SIPAC, like you mentioned at the beginning, so you can see all throughout. SIPAC's the whole United States, right?
We're at, I think, 3 or 46 states, so almost
Pretty,
everyone. But
almost.
yeah, a few exceptions.
Close. Sure.
But yeah, so if folks want to meet virtually in one of those side pack states, happy to support them through that.
Are you on any social media, Instagram,
Yeah.
TikTok?
Yeah, folks can also find me on Instagram at Dr. Jenna Brownfield.
Okay.
So I post lots of trans affirming content, bi affirming content. Yeah, and hopefully in the future, wanting to have some more conversation there with folks about navigating family
Yeah.
relationships.
Wonderful. Well, this has
Yeah.
been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today
Yeah, thank
and
you, Ryan.
sharing your insight.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn more or follow either of us on social media, you can find more information in the show notes. Thanks for your support and listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.